A lot of the videos out there on managing anxiety are all about quick fixes. And it's better to get it out of the way right now to say that there is no quick fix for anxiety. That might not be what you want to hear, but it's better than coming from an expectation that something's going to be different with a quick fix. Bear with me in this video. I'm a registered occupational therapist in Australia, and I teach people emotion regulation skills and anxiety and depression management strategies during the week as my job. Cold therapy and approaches like that are all the rage. But the thing about anxiety is, if it's in your body, it's really here for the long term. And the other thing is that a lot of the time with these different strategies, they don't have any context. It's quite important to tell the difference between a crisis situation, which might involve panic, and longer term anxiety. There's really two branches to anxiety. One is a cognitive process, which is often about worry, and the other one is much more of a body response. When we get these two things mixed up, the strategies get mixed up. So in a more heightened state, it's quite useful to go for body-oriented strategies. And these two broad approaches are known as top-down or bottom-up. So the top-down approach is coming from the top down in terms of literally coming from the brain, where regulation strategies are based on thinking, as opposed to bottom-up, which comes from the body. So when we use body strategies, those might be more intense and quick, but they don't solve the thinking problem. And often in a situation of really acute anxiety or panic, often the thinking won't solve the problem. So it's useful to try both approaches in different situations and work out which one's more effective for you. One of the other things that's really important to understand is the function of emotion. All emotions serve a purpose, and anxiety is one of those. Having had my own mental health issues, many of these things have been incredibly useful to me at an individual level. And whilst not all strategies work for all people, there are some really important themes around effective mental health strategies, or skills as we call them, that generally can work for many people. It's just a question of context and at what point in time these things work. So in terms of the framework, understanding in a cognitive framework, one might look at key questions that you can ask yourself, such as, does the feeling that I'm experiencing at the moment fit the facts of the situation? In a situation of immediate stress and anxiety, such as having to give a presentation in a workplace, one might experience a heightened state of anxiety. In those situations, the anxiety definitely fits the facts, because anxiety is often about concern for an outcome in a situation. In those moments, it's quite common for people to not want to feel anxiety. If you've ever been in a situation where you felt that and know how unpleasant it is, there's a very human urge to want to get rid of the discomfort. That point alone is something that I would encourage you to try and notice when you're experiencing different emotions, and not just with anxiety. Try and see that that emotion in that moment is a piece of information, and it's not something to try and push away. The more you try and push away those emotions, the more difficult it becomes. And often that's when we end up in something that we might call a thinking loop, or sometimes what we refer to as rumination. So it's a conditioned thinking response, often associated with the unknown or worry. And those types of thought processes often get reinforced over a longer period of time. So there are no quick fixes for that. But one of the most important things is to interrupt it. One of the ways of interrupting it can be practicing recognizing. When we recognize that process, it allows us to observe it, notice body feelings, come to terms with some of the signals that the body is giving us. And one of the most common symptoms people would experience would be an increase in their heart rate. So in that situation, paying attention to the heart rate can go one of two ways. It either increases anxiety and panic, or it might lead to a decrease with some practice around tolerating the sensation itself. And one way that we can do that is noticing those body experiences and then breathing at the same time and deliberately slowing and pacing the breath. An example of that might be a simple count, or doing a visualization exercise with a metaphor such as inhaling into a balloon, or imagining your belly as a balloon and increasing the pressure in that. And those types of strategies are some of the most direct ways of affecting the vagus nerve without getting into pseudoscience. So breathing in itself and slowing the breath and pacing the breath is probably one of the most effective ways of actually self-regulating an anxiety response. So those would be predominantly bottom-up strategies. And at the same time, practicing top-down strategies when one feels more calm can yield an important change as well, because partly that process helps us to understand that we can actually tolerate the feeling itself. The more we practice tolerating just the feeling, the better chance we have of actually being able to regulate it. If we tell ourselves things like, I can't handle this, or I don't want this, I shouldn't feel like this right now, it puts us into what's called a meta-emotional process, and that only makes it much harder to regulate. So when you're saying things to yourself, practice validating the emotion that you're having. So I'm noticing I'm feeling this right now, and I don't need to fix it. If you say to yourself, I don't need to fix it, we're really talking about in that moment. And it's important to mention that it's not about trying to solve an immediate crisis or problem. If you were in a situation where there is an immediate physical threat or something that you have to attend to, then you've got to attend to it. Which brings me to the next point around problem solving. If anxiety is driven by problem solving needs, for example, if I'm worried about being late for something, I need to make sure that I'm getting myself organized. So even though anxiety is valid, it's giving me information about what I need to attend to. And sometimes with that anxiety, it's something we might need to attend to quite quickly. So delaying or avoiding doing something effective about it is potentially only making that situation worse. I'd like to summarize the two approaches being the top-down and the bottom-up. When it comes to top-down or thinking brain, try and reassure yourself to tolerate the body response itself and to not have to fix the problem unless you have an immediate problem. And at the same time, try and regulate your breath and slow things down without getting caught in the body response itself, and continually remind yourself that you don't need to fix it. And all you're doing when you're talking to yourself about the body response is practicing tolerating it. I can tolerate this feeling. By tolerating it and noticing it, I'm not going to make it worse. So one way you can try and remember the different strategies for this is with the mnemonic RAIN. R-A-I-N. Recognize the feeling itself and being there. So I'm noticing I feel these sensations at the moment, and then I can acknowledge it and accept it and allow it. Acknowledge, accept, allow. Any of those A's would work. And we're practicing not forcing it or pushing it away. That's the most important thing. So giving it space to be there without judging it, without saying I shouldn't feel this. And then the I would be to investigate. So what information is this emotion giving me? What's it about? Potentially, why is it here? There is a balance point between acknowledgement and investigating and also overthinking it. So don't try too hard to find an answer or a reason. There's an element here of going with the flow a little bit. If you're caught up with it, then the most important thing would be to interrupt that process. But give it a little bit of time, investigate, and then nurture. So nurture is a nod to self-compassion. So we're giving ourselves the opportunity to self-validate, accept ourselves, and also to really bring that awareness with compassion to our own experience without trying to tell ourselves anything about it that we should or shouldn't do. And also we might be going through a really hard time, and being more open to experience it in itself is a more compassionate position. That's a summary of some of the more effective approaches for dealing with anxiety. And many of these are thoroughly tried and tested in my 10 years of experience doing group therapy on a daily basis during the week in my job. And I would encourage you to try some of these really fundamental approaches, especially if some of the other things that you found have not been useful. I'll put a link to the infographic with the RAIN mnemonic up there as well. And finally, if you're suffering or if you're in a risky position at the moment, I need to emphasize that it's really important to take action. There are things that you can do. Please follow up if you need to. If you found any of these strategies helpful, please leave a comment, and I'll be sure to add many more mental health videos with evidence-based strategies in the coming weeks going forward. Thanks for staying to the end, and all the best.